Hi, everyone. My name is Johan, and I'm part of the team at Pond. I want to welcome you to today's vendor demo session with Ansley from Atlas. Before I turn it over to her, I quickly wanted to remind everyone that if you're interested in learning more about this solution, we'd encourage you to send Ansley a Pond message. You can do this by logging into your account, then navigating to the Atlas provider page and clicking send message. From there, you can get all your questions answered or request a one-on-one meeting. And as a reminder, we'll put Pond credits in your account for every meeting arranged through the platform. Without further ado, let me turn it over to Ansley.
Thank you so much. Hey, everybody. So yeah, I'm super excited to give you a demo of Atlas. If you do have any questions while we're going through, just drop it in the chat. Like, it can be super informal. Just ask as we go. But yeah, let's get started. All right. So the purpose of Atlas is to make grant management as easy as possible, which obviously in spreadsheets is not super easy. But the other really cool thing that Atlas does is allow grant funders and grant recipients to seamlessly collaborate in the same platform. So I will walk through the recipient side of the platform, and then I'll just show you the funder side in case there are any funders that are interested or anyone who's also giving and receiving funding. But they are very, very similar, but we'll stick to the recipient side for now. So when you first log in, you get this dashboard. So you get an overview of where the status of your funding. So we will populate transactions here in a minute, so you'll get to see more information here. But basically, this serves as cash flow. So especially if you're getting grants that are paid in as reimbursements, it's really, really helpful to know if you're running out of money, but also just to be able to see those transactions over time. Next, we have details of your funding by name and then funding by type. And this card combined with this card, which is Lifetime Funding Metrics, helps you understand where your return on investment is. So if you're sending 10 applications out and you're only receiving one, are you routinely getting federal grants or foundation grants? Like, what does that look like so that you can spend your time in the best place? And lastly, we have this tasks card. So it shows you every task that has not been completed yet. And obviously all this information, there's a lot more of it throughout the software, but this is just a high level overview. So let's go and create a grant. And then we can see how that runs through the whole system. So when you create a funding, you can just enter the name and we'll walk through this as if we were a homeless shelter. So let's say homeless shelter grant, $100,000. We want it. Let's start it beginning of September through December. Actually, let's go back a little bit. All right, and funding areas, call this housing. And I will make myself the funding manager. You can make whoever you want. And let's say the origin is local government. Funder name, we'll just call it Atlas. All right, and it's that easy to create a funding. So once this is populated, we will go into the funding detail. And this is where we can see a lot more information about the funding source when my internet catches up. Promise it's cool. I'm just gonna wait for a second. Remember what dial-up was like? Yeah. All right, well, let's see if we can short circuit. All right, here we go. All right, so next we can create our budget. So let's say we've got an admin budget line item. Let's call it just like 20% of the funding. And then say programming budget is, let's call it 70. And every grant should allow for a tech budget. So we're gonna put that in. And there you go. Now we have our funding budget set up. So the other thing we can do is set up outcome metrics. We can do that a little bit later, but we can add funding specific documents and funding specific tasks. So let's say we have a cloud file that we want to add. I can just call this document, come over here to a Google Doc, copy the link, drop it in here. And then what's really cool is that we have these things called associations. So you can associate this document with a transaction, a funding, program, task, all these other things. So when you're on those pages, you can see this document. So the idea of getting rid of this like siloed data that's really, really common in grant management, everything is where you need it to be when you need it to be there. You can also create folders if you want to include this document in a folder, and you can control who gets access. So if I just say this document, I'm the only person who will be able to see this. If I give access to other people, they will also be able to see it. But you can decide if something's sensitive and all that kind of stuff. You can control who can see it. So we will save that document, and you can also add local files. I won't walk you through that because all of you know how to add a local file. But yeah, so cloud or local. And then this button here will actually allow you to download a zip file of all the local documents. You can't really download a cloud document the same way. But if you need to submit a grant report or something and you need to have documentation, you can download that zip file and submit it to your funder really, really easily. So next is funding tasks. And the really cool thing about tasks is that we totally understand that not everyone inside your organization has any need to be inside Atlas regularly, if at all. So what we've done is make it so that we don't have a cap on the number of user seats. So you can add everyone in your organization if you want. And then when you create a task, let's call this grant report due. And we'll say that it's due on the last day. I can add, let's say I'm a 50-person organization, I can add all 50 people, and whoever needs to be reminded of this, I can add as a collaborator. But since not everyone is going to be in Atlas all of the time, these notifications actually go out via email. So everyone will be notified via email that they need to do a task. And then when you mark it as done, again, those go out via email. If you mark something as not done, those go out via email again. So I can set up a notification date, let's say, like a month before it's due. And then again, we have these associations here. So I can associate this task with transaction, funding, or a program. So I can see that information on whatever page I'm on. All right, so now we have our task set up. So let's take a step back and actually go to the transactions and see how the budget versus actual changes in real time. So there are 3 ways to upload transactions, or almost 3. We're getting ready to launch our QuickBooks Online integration, which will pull transactions in automatically, which should be really helpful. But you can also import transactions via CSV, or you can add them manually. We do an extensive onboarding process. They're like, I really don't want to upload 2,000 transactions. Don't worry about it. We take care of all of that, and we can upload them for you going forward. We do like really, really high touch customer service because y'all are busy. No one has time for uploading transactions. So we can handle that for you. But what happens here is, let's say we have these transactions in here, and let's say payroll. And I want to associate that with that homeless shelter grant. And we're going to call this admin. Now that is being factored into the budget versus actual. So when I go back to the grants page, I can see that my budget has changed. Here we go. So now this admin budget line item is fully spent. Obviously, that's not how everything actually happens, but you get the idea. The other thing that you can do, which is really helpful for grant budgeting, is split transactions. So if, let's say, payroll, I have a payroll expense, and let's say 10,000 of this is actually going to a different grant. So here we go. Is going to this one, and let's say that 10,000 is actually going to something else. Let's say this grant. So now I have split this out according to the different grant budget line items, and I can also split it like in the same grant to actually different budget line items within that grant. So you can make sure that at any given time, all of your transactions are being really, really detailed inside of Atlas. So one other thing to note is a lot of people do this already, like in QuickBooks. And in a previous life, I used to do grant consulting and things like that. And I'm sure you guys know, like doing this stuff in QuickBooks makes it really complicated, makes your accounting software complicated, makes it difficult for IRS reporting, makes CPAs go crazy. No one wants to make their CPA mad. So the really nice thing about Atlas is that we run parallel to your accounting software. So you can do all of your like IRS type accounting inside your accounting software. You don't need to change the chart of accounts. You don't need to use classes or anything like that to manage your grants. And you can do that here. So your grants team can make sure that everything looks good according to the grant reports, and your finance team can make sure everything looks good for IRS reporting and audits and things like that. You can also edit a transaction. Again, inside accounting software, you need to make sure that you're using proper cash or accrual basis accounting. Inside here, you can take a few liberties. If it's like, okay, well, for a grant report, I need this to appear on this date. That's not a problem. That's not illegal. Don't worry. So you can change that stuff here if you need to. And lastly, you can attach your document. So it looks just like the other page that we saw. But you can attach a file to this transaction, and you'll be able to see it here. When you do anything to the transactions, you will see this drop down. So we can look here and see that this was a split transaction. So you can see the original transaction here. So if you ever need to cross-reference this with your accounting software and you're like, I don't see this, and it's because it was split, you can see that original transaction right here with the original date and everything in case you need to reference it later. All right, so next we will go to programs. So programs are obviously like the high level initiative that you're trying to do. So with Atlas, you have your transactions, money in, money out, just basic financial stuff. Then you have your funding sources, which is money with a budget attached to it. And then your programs, which are the higher level initiatives that you're trying to do. So what we have enabled you to do is actually see how money from your grants is funneled into these different programs. So let's try one here. So let's say this is your housing program, and the total program amount is $250,000. And let's say that's for this year. All right, and I'll make myself program manager. There we go. All right, and then we'll go to the program details. And what you can do here with the budget is actually allocate some of that funding source to this and say, all right, of that $100,000 grant, let's say all $100,000 of it is going to this program, not a million. There we go. And then let's say you want to track a fundraising campaign or something like that. You can also so you can break down like all the ways that funding is going to this program, and then generate reports and things that let you see how all of this stuff is coming together. So again, with the program details, you also have your outcome metrics, which, like I said, we'll add later. And then you have your program specific documents and program specific tasks that you add the exact same way that you would on the funding page that I showed you. But if we go back to the transactions, you can see here that there is a program column. So I can go back to these payroll transactions and say, hey, this went to that housing program, and the budget line item was that grant. And then, yeah, there you go. So you can see how this transaction is going to be associated with the funding source and with your program. And again, if y'all have any questions while I'm going, just drop it in the chat. Next is outcome metric. So this is in beta. We launched it about a month ago. But the way we've approached outcome metrics is with the idea that we need to create something that both, an orchestra and a homeless shelter can use. How in the world do you do that? I don't know. But this is how we're doing it until, we get lots of feedback saying, you should do it this way. So basically what we realize is like the first step to outcome metrics is literally just tracking this stuff in real time. If you're waiting until the end of your grant cycle, it is really hard to have accurate data about what you actually did. So let's say for this homeless shelter, let's say case management meetings. And let's say your target is 1,000 and your units are meetings. And let's say it's for the whole year. All right, and you can associate this outcome metric with the funding and with the program. So we will associate it with our homeless shelter grant and with our housing program. And then you can give it a manager, and then you can actually give it a reminder frequency. So if I say I want a daily reminder then I'm going to get a daily notification inside the app. You won't get a bunch of emails saying, hey, you need to log this outcome metric for the day. And then once we go into the details, oh, not that one. All right, here we go. Then you can see this log here. So when I come in here to log, let's say I did 10 case management meetings today. I can associate this with a funding budget if I want, like if this needs to be directly tracked back to a specific funding budget line item, and then give it a description, you know, whatever you want. But the nice thing is that I can upload documents to this. So if I need to track documents for these case management meetings, I can attach them here. And again, you can choose who has access. So if this is sensitive information and you want to make sure your case management team are the only people who can see this, then you can share it with just your case management team. But you can actually download all of these documents. So if you need documentation to back up this information, you have it right here. And again, you can see all the different associations and all of that. So as you're tracking over time, you have a really nice log that you can use for your grant reporting. You can also, as you create more outcome metrics, you can see the other outcome metrics that go to the same funding or program. So again, you can see how all of this stuff is working together to paint a really robust narrative of what in the world you're doing with this money. All right, next is tasks. So you've seen how we created tasks, but of course we have a dedicated tasks page so you can keep track of everything. So we have a list view and a calendar view, depending on how your brain works. I am a list view type of girl, so here we go. You literally get to see a list of your tasks, very much like you would see with Google or anything else, but instead of having to share one across your whole team or everyone has different task accounts or anything like that, you have all of your tasks for all of your grants right here in one place. So you can see who all the collaborators are, priority, all of the associations, all of that good stuff. The other thing that is really cool about tasks and documents, which I'll show you in a minute, is you can actually share them outside your organization. So like I said, we have a funder side and a recipient side. So let's say your funder is inside Atlas as well. You can share a task with them or they can share a task with you. So if you need something from them and you're tired of that email getting lost in, you know, their long list of unread, then you can do that here. It'll show up on their side. They will not be able to share it with anyone else. They will not be able to lead it or anything like that, but they will know that they need to complete a task. They can also share one with you. So, you know, if your funder can actually set up a grant for you when they award it to you, create all your tasks, set up all your documents, share that whole thing with you, and then take some of that weight off of you because y'all are already doing so much. When a task is done, you can mark it as done. And all of those collaborators will get an email. If someone marks it as done and you check it and you're like, that is for sure not done, you can toggle your done tasks here, check the check mark again, it will mark it as not done. And again, everyone will get an email saying, hey, we need to relook at this task. All right, moving on to documents. So again, a list of your documents. This will populate every document you add throughout the entire system and that you add directly to this documents page. You'll be able to see who added it and who has access to it. We also have foldering, like I said, and again, you can see who added it and who had access to it. You can edit that and all that good stuff. And then if you want to see the documents within a folder, you can click on the folder name. This one's boring, has nothing, but yeah, you get the idea. And lastly is reporting, everyone's favorite subject. So we have a lot of pre-made reports, like the most basic ones you would need: income statement, budget versus actual for your specific funding, specific program. But the other thing that we do is we can build custom reports for you. So if you're dealing with like an obscure federal report that's making you, want to pull your hair out, we can build that for you. As long as the data is inside Atlas, we can pull that out in the form of a report. Same thing for funders. If you want all of your recipients to be using the same report, we can build that and make that available to all of them. And then you're getting everything in the exact same format, which is really, really helpful for condensing that information into a narrative. So let's look at the budget versus actual report. So by default, the budget versus actual is going to, well, actually any of these reports are going to default to the date, like the start and end dates of your grant. But you can edit and change these and things like that. And you can see here, this is what we actually spent money on. So there you go. Very simple budget versus actual. You can download it as a PDF and then send that to whoever you need to send it to. And I won't bore you with the other reports because y'all know what reports are. But yeah, that is the basic overview. We try to make it as simple and easy as possible and take everything that's inside spreadsheets and just condense it into one really easy to use software. I did promise to show you the funder side, so I'll do that real quick. But if you are just a funder, this is what you will see. If you're just a recipient, you'll only see the other side. But if you are both a funder and a recipient, you'll have this nice little toggle up here. You can move between both sides. So again, this side is very, very similar to the recipient side with two additional things, which are applications. So you can create applications that you receive. We don't have a way yet for people to actually apply within the system, but we hope to have that probably next year. But you can see all those, and then a light CRM where you can track the different touch points between applicants and award recipients and see, how much you've given them, all that kind of stuff. But yeah, thank you guys so much.
I do have one question for you, just as we
Yeah,
wrap up. What's the right type of org to start with Atlas? Like how many grants do they need? Like, do they make it on the basis of like dollars granted, number of grants? Like, how should they think about whether or not this is the right solution for them?
So that's actually a really complicated question and one that we still have. So it's not a specific number of grants. It's not necessarily a specific dollar amount. It's more of where your organization is going. So I've seen incredibly complicated $10,000 grants and really easy $100,000 grants. So that makes it complicated. But the biggest thing that I tell people is think long-term. If, in 5 years, you want to have $1 million worth of grants, you're going to have to prove that you have something in place to be able to manage that. Like you will be asked about your financial controls. You will be asked about many, many things pertaining to your grant workflow, especially if you're applying for state or federal grants. So getting into the habit of doing that now is really important because trying to build a workflow like in real time is a disaster. So the nice thing is like we've tiered the pricing. So if you have like less than $50,000 is like $50 a month, all the way up to over $1 million. So it's very scalable. If you're like, I want to use this, but I don't have a huge budget, we have a workaround for that.
That's great. Awesome. This was really informative. Thanks for taking the time today, Ansley. And like I said at the beginning, if anyone wants to connect with Atlas, you can do that through the Atlas provider page on Pond, and you can send Ansley and the team a message from there. Great. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, guys.
Weekend. Okay. Bye-bye.